The council chamber shimmered with refracted light, as if the walls themselves were uncertain how to react. Administrator Ven 8 stood before the assembly, sensory stalks twitching with a mixture of confusion and awe. High Counselor Zix, whose crystalline body usually radiated with the calm authority of the prismatic collective, was flickering through hues of disbelief. "You're telling me," Zix began slowly, "that the humans passed the test?" Ven 8 shifted awkwardly. "Yes, your luminescence. All 3 components." Silence fell over the chamber. Not the respectful kind, but the stunned everything you know has just been upended kind. For over 47,000 cycles, the galactic sentience evaluation had been the gold standard, the final filter that determined whether a species was worthy of integration into the broader interstellar community. Countless civilizations had attempted it. None had succeeded completely. Until now. "And you're certain the data is correct?" Zix asked, their voice a low, crystalline hum, almost hesitant. "We triple verified. Cross-checked by the Epsilon Hive and even the Gloran Collective. Who? Well, you remember what happened to their facilities last time. They wouldn't dare make another mistake." Zix pulsed a deep, thoughtful blue. The same humans who electrocute themselves for fun and film each other falling off furniture for entertainment. They pass the most sophisticated cognitive and ethical examination in galactic history? Ven 8 nodded, with what they call flying colors, which, I've come to understand, is not literal. Zix drifted in silence, rotating slowly in contemplation. It wasn't that the test was unfair. Quite the opposite. It was crafted by a coalition of the brightest minds in the galaxy to be as balanced and comprehensive as possible. 3 distinct challenges, each evaluating a core trait of sentient civilization: advanced problem-solving, complex ethical reasoning, and adaptive response under unpredictable conditions. For eons, those 3 pillars had revealed the limits of every intelligent species. The Zorian failed the problem-solving test, despite having 17 cerebral lobes. Their sheer processing power couldn't overcome the non-linear feedback loops of the quantum maze. The Epsilon Eridani hive mind, a species with a distributed neural network across thousands of bodies, had fallen into a recursive ethical debate and refused to proceed until unanimous consensus was reached. It never was. And then there were the Glorine, a species so passionate, so expressive, that their failure was so catastrophic it was still only spoken of in whispers. 3 testing stations lost, still apologizing through interpretive dance. Zix blinked a shimmer of white static, a rare show of raw emotion. So how did the humans succeed where every other species failed? Ven 8 pulled up the projection on the central platform. It started when the test's randomizer selected a representative 1 Sarah Chen, 9th grade physics teacher, Cleveland, Earth. Random selection protocol was based on quantum sampling, though we believe the humans now suspect it was something closer to blind luck. "A teacher?" Zix asked incredulously. "Not a scientist, not a military leader. A teacher. They teach juveniles about basic physical laws," Ven said carefully. Though, based on the transcript, she described her profession as explaining to teenagers why eating laundry detergent is a bad idea. Zix went silent again. Their form pulsed through orange, then gray, then back to a pale blue, so she passed the problem-solving phase. She did more than pass. She solved the maze, discovered 3 optimization exploits we didn't know existed, and reported a logic bug that could allow for negative completion time, all while consulting with what she called her nerd squad over a communication device. She cheated. "No, your luminescence," Ven said quickly. "There were no explicit instructions forbidding collaboration. In fact, the test was designed to assess species-level intelligence. We just assumed that each species would nominate their best individual mind. We didn't expect a culture that doesn't approach problems as individuals at all." "That's absurd," Zix muttered. "Every other species understands that tests are personal. A measure of one's merit, intellect, integrity." Ven hesitated, That's precisely the issue, your luminescence. The humans didn't treat the test as a measure of individual worth. They treated it like another group project, something they could crowdsource meme joke about and still somehow solve. Zix absorbed that silently, watching the replay from Sarah's testing room. The tiny human calmly asking if she could use her phone, the orb hesitating, the flurry of messages exchanged, the laughter, the means. This was not how tests were taken. She didn't try to prove anything, Zix said softly. She just did what came naturally. And that, Ven replied, is why they passed. Zix shifted to a deep shade of mauve, signaling reflection. Do you understand what this means? In 47,000 cycles, every civilization has approached our test as a solemn challenge. A rite of passage, a final exam of cosmic importance. The humans treated it like a Tuesday. Ven's sensory stalks drooped, uncertain. Is that good? Zix's body suddenly brightened to a brilliant white. It might be the best possible outcome. There was a long pause as the weight of that thought settled over them both. The realization that perhaps the galactic community had been looking at the question of readiness all wrong. Maybe it wasn't about raw intellect or moral perfection or even the ability to improvise under pressure. Maybe it was about something simpler: collaboration, curiosity, playfulness, and the humility to ask for help. Zix finally turned back to Ven. Send the acceptance notification. Already done, your luminescence, Ven replied. Apparently, the human posted it on something called Instagram before leaving the testing facility. It's already received over 1 million likes and several hundred comments asking if aliens are verified on Twitter. Zix emitted a low melodic sound that might have been laughter. The universe just got a lot more interesting. Back on Earth, in a fluorescent-lit classroom in Cleveland, Sarah Chen walked into her 9th grade physics class the next morning, coffee in hand, and 25 students practically vibrating in their seats. Miss Chen, one of them blurted, did you really take an alien test yesterday? Sarah smiled. Yes, and tell your mom thanks for the tip about the Starbucks gift card. It worked like a charm. She picked up her marker and turned to the whiteboard. Now who's ready to learn quantum mechanics? And somewhere, light years away, the Galactic Council was still trying to understand how the species that invented cat videos had just become the future of interstellar civilization. Just another Tuesday, Sarah Chen wasn't nervous. That surprised her a little. You'd think being abducted invited technically by a floating orb and whisked away to a galactic testing facility hidden in some quantum fold of reality would have triggered at least some anxiety. But honestly, it felt like the start of every standardized test week back at her school. The room she was in glowed faintly blue, sterile and far too clean. Floating nearby was a translucent orb that kept pulsing in rhythm, like a jellyfish made of glass. It had identified itself as her test proctor, though Sarah had taken to calling it Glowy. So let me get this straight, she said, arms crossed as she studied the floating alien interface. This is some kind of big interstellar exam to see if humanity gets to join your little galactic country club. The orb pulsed affirmatively. It is the sentience qualification evaluation. It measures a species' readiness to integrate with the galactic community. The test includes 3 essential categories: problem-solving, ethics, and adaptability, Sarah finished, waving her hand. Yeah. You said all that during the intro presentation. Just making sure I got it right. The orb brightened. Your comprehension is commendable. Most participants exhibit elevated stress responses upon learning the stakes. Sarah shrugged. I've survived a year of remote learning and a semester with a classroom that didn't have heating. You're gonna have to try harder to shake me, Glowy. She pulled out her phone, more from habit than anything else, and blinked in surprise. 5 bars. 5 bars. She was in an alien testing chamber on another planet or dimension. Whatever, and her carrier still had coverage. Wait, this thing works here? She asked, waving the phone at the orb. The orb hesitated. The facility includes dimensional signal accommodation to prevent psychological distress. Personal devices are permitted for emotional regulation purposes. Sarah snorted. So, it's allowed, technically, yes. There is no restriction against using external tools or support networks. She grinned. Good to know. She immediately tapped into her group chat. The title of the thread was Nerds Assemble, and it was exactly what it sounded like, a handful of her old college friends who were always ready for some chaotic science banter. Sarah. Okay, so I'm in a literal alien intelligence test, Sarah. Like actual aliens, Sarah. And I need help solving what looks like a quantum maze, rocket girl, Jess. No way, your brain, Brian, on. It's happening, philosophy Fenty. Is this finally the alien invasion, or is this just you in a new escape room? Sarah. Not a drill, y'all. Fate of humanity. Let's solve this like it's a group project. She attached a picture of the glowing puzzle hovering in front of her. Within seconds, the replies started rolling in: suggestions, references, diagrams, jokes. Someone even made a meme about the maze and labeled it Dark Souls level, Quantum Edition. The orb floated beside her, dimming slightly. You are not taking this evaluation as seriously as anticipated. I am serious, Sarah said, pulling a pen from her pocket and drawing a crude diagram on the back of a napkin she found in her coat. I just don't think serious means solemn. You ever try to teach teenagers physics? If you don't throw in a meme every 5 minutes, you lose them. She tapped her phone. Besides, what kind of test doesn't let you ask your friends for help? You're evaluating a species, not just me, right? Well, this is what we do. We crowdsource our genius. We make chaos productive. The orb hesitated. Your methodology is unconventional. Sarah smirked. Welcome to Earth, glowy. We don't do conventional. By the time she reached the second part of the test, the ethical reasoning segment, Sarah had already settled into a rhythm. She was sipping water, doodling with a stylus on her tablet, and updating her group chat with the new scenario the orb presented. Another moral conundrum. Something complicated about limited resources, sentient AI, and a diplomatic hostage situation. Honestly, the kind of thing she figured should have been left to lawyers or United Nations panels. But she wasn't going to overthink it. Okay, Pete. This one's yours, she texted. Ethics 101. Philosophy brain time. Pete. Trolley problem, but make it galactic, Jess. Wait, is this the one with the robot president? Brian. I'm citing Kent and Spock, Jess. No, don't bring in Spock. He ruins everything, Sarah. I'm screenshotting this entire thread for my future dissertation. The orb seemed increasingly disturbed as she kept pulling resources from Wikipedia, academic forums, Reddit threads, even XKD comics. At one point, she submitted a summary of her proposed solution, complete with citations, a joke about Schrodinger's morals, and a chart comparing ethical systems across major Earth cultures. The orb made a sound that could only be described as electronic hyperventilation. This test was designed to challenge your species' moral compass, it said, voice crackling slightly. You are mimicking your way through it. Sarah looked up. Do you know how many philosophy majors on Earth had existential breakdowns over the trolley problem? You're lucky I only sent you the clean memes. By the time they reached the final test adaptive response, Sarah was thriving. This time, she didn't even ask for instructions. She just sent a new message to the group chat. Sarah, final boss round. Alien says I need to demonstrate adaptability. Sarah, suggestions? Kyle, first rule of improv. Always say yes and Jess. Chaos monkey energy, Brian. Explosions, Sarah. Okay, wow. Calm down, Jess. Controlled explosions, Pete. Educational explosions. Within 2 hours, Sarah had orchestrated what could only be described as a fusion of MacGyver engineering, live performance art, and a TED Talk on why cats always land on their feet. She used her phone, a few paper clips, a cup of cold coffee, and a Starbucks gift card to trigger a controlled micro-fusion reaction. Her group chat was actively helping her debug the process in real time, and through it all, she was laughing. Quipping back at the orb, cracking jokes, documenting the whole thing on her camera for posterity, and taking the occasional selfie with the testing equipment. The orb was completely still by the end. Its glow had faded to a soft, dim pulse. "This was not how the test was meant to go," it said quietly. Sarah shrugged, dropping into a nearby chair. "Maybe your test wasn't built to handle us. You designed it to find species who could pass a challenge, but we don't always pass things the usual way. Sometimes we duct tape the challenge to the side of a rocket and call it Tuesday." She leaned back, stretched, and took a long sip of her water. "You want to know why we passed? It's because we didn't treat this like some sacred rite. We treated it like a problem. And when humans see a problem..." She held up her phone, still buzzing with notifications and chat messages. "We ask for help." Sarah Chen didn't expect to go viral in the middle of an alien intelligence test. She also hadn't expected to be the human representative for first contact with the Galactic Council. But, to be fair, she hadn't expected a lot of things like getting randomly quantum selected out of Cleveland while grading pop quizzes, or that her phone would somehow get full bars in a testing chamber, presumably located somewhere outside Earth's known physics. But once she was here, in a sterile alien room with a glowing orb floating in front of her and a test that apparently decided the fate of humanity, she did the only thing that made sense. She opened the group chat. Nerds Assemble was originally just a silly college thread between her and a handful of her friends. Now, it was humanity's impromptu problem-solving council. Problem-solving. "So this is a quantum maze," the orb said, projecting a complex Ford holographic structure into the room. "You must navigate its..." "Wait," Sarah interrupted, pulling out her phone. "Are there rules against using help?" The orb flickered. "The test is meant to evaluate species-level cognitive function, not individual performance." Cool. "So no rules against group work?" "No." "Great." She opened the chat. "Sarah. Okay, nerds, alien IQ test. I'm staring at what looks like a Klein bottle on steroids. Der brain, Brian. Oh, those are fun. Classic quantum tunneling traps. Rocket Girl Jess. Is there a time limit? Sarah. Unclear. Orb didn't say. Quantum Queen Ma. Check for recursive nodes in the fifth-dimensional axis. Brian. You might be able to trick the system if it doesn't have non-local feedback safeguards. 20 minutes later, after a flurry of screen shares, diagrams, and a gif of a cat falling into a box labeled superposition, Sarah had solved the maze. Not only that, she had found 3 shortcuts, a loophole that let her technically solve it twice at once, and even a bug in the simulation that she reported to the orb like a casual K-tester. The orb dimmed. "You have completed the maze," Sarah smiled. "With flying colors, I believe is the Earth phrase. That was not expected. Buddy, we once beat a Mars rover bug with a software patch made by a guy in his pajamas at 2 a.m. You think a fancy laser puzzle's gonna trip us up? Ethical reasoning." Next, the orb brought up a complex scenario. Resources, sentient rights, planetary colonization, the whole package. Most species had locked up on this part, especially the hive minds, who tended to spiral into endless consensus loops. "But Sarah? Let me guess," she said, already opening a new thread. "Trolley problem, but in space." The orb paused. "It's more complex than that." "Cool. So's Reddit." Sarah. "Alien moral dilemma time. Imagine the trolley problem, but with AI and food shortages. Philosophize, Pete. Oh, I got this. Kant. Utilitarianism? Rawls. Let's build a model. Jess. Don't forget the Spock versus Kirk framework. Ma. I'll run it through a moral simulation bot. Also, just sent you a meme. Pete. I'm drafting an argument based on virtue ethics. Brian. Do memes count as ethical communication? Within an hour, Sarah had submitted an annotated multi-perspective solution with footnotes, diagrams, and at least 2 XKD comics. The orb seemed frozen. This is a level of ethical debate and diversity of thought we did not anticipate. You gave me a moral dilemma, Sarah replied, casually sipping from her water bottle. I gave you 10,000 years of human debate history, a Reddit thread, and 3 memes about it. We don't solve ethics, We argue about it forever, and we enjoy the ride. Adaptive response. By the third phase, Sarah was basically having fun. The orb, on the other hand, looked like it needed a lie down. The final component, it said cautiously, is adaptive response. You will be placed in an unpredictable scenario and must respond appropriately. In other words, improv. Sarah grinned. You're really leaning into the drama with this one, huh? She opened her phone again. Sarah, final round. Think a MacGyver meets whose line is it anyway? Improve, Master Kyle. Yes, and Jess, chaos mode unlocked. Brian, have you considered explosions? Sarah, define controlled. Sarah, gonna wing it. Over the next 2 hours, Sarah built a fully functional demonstration out of whatever alien components she could repurpose. She used a plastic bottle, a solar panel from a maintenance drone, 2 holographic projectors, and something that looked like a stapler but had quantum in its label. The end result: a small-scale, controlled fusion reaction designed to safely power the testing facility's auxiliary systems, combined with a dramatic TikTok-style explanation involving 3 meme references, a physical demonstration of Newton's third law using a spinning chair, and a video of a cat jumping into a box that she insisted was vital to the education tanked. She documented the whole thing, of course. Posted clips to her account. Her group chat had already started tagging it alien test fails and teacher off the galaxy. When it was all over, the orb was utterly silent. Not dimmed off. Sarah leaned back against the console. So, we done here. Meanwhile, at Galactic HQ, Administrator Van 8 was already preparing the report. She passed all 3 sections, they said. Still dazed. Problem-solving ethics. Adaptability. And not just passed, she exceeded benchmarks by a staggering margin. Counselor 6 stared at the playback. She didn't approach the test like a test, they said slowly. No, Ven agreed. She approached it like a group project, a challenge to tackle with others, to enjoy. Zix tilted their crystalline body thoughtfully. Other species saw our test as a solemn measure of merit. She saw it as a puzzle, a game. Something to laugh about while solving. She used memes, Ven whispered, in a galactic qualification assessment. She used community, humor, collaboration, everything we underestimated. And she made it look fun. Back on Earth, Sarah was back in her classroom by Monday. Her students were still buzzing about the alien test. One had seen the viral clip of her explaining controlled fusion with a Starbucks gift card. Another was live streaming the moment she walked in, hoping for a shout-out from the Galactic Council. Miss Chen, one student said, eyes wide. Did you really solve the test with your phone and a meme group chat? Sarah just smiled. Technically, I solved it with the help of the internet, a handful of nerds, and a whole lot of improvisation. The memes were just a bonus. Another student raised their hand. So, what's the lesson? She looked at them for a long second, then picked up a marker and wrote on the board. Collaboration beats isolation. Humor fuels resilience. Creativity solves the impossible. Below it, she added, also, never underestimate the power of a group chat. Back in the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council, Administrator Van 8 hovered at their post, sensory stalks stiff with residual disbelief. Their screen still displayed the last few minutes of Sarah Chen's adaptive response test, where she casually performed a controlled fusion reaction using a coffee cup, a hair tie, and what she claimed was just a little TikTok magic. Across from them, High Counselor Zix remained unusually still. The counselor's crystalline body, typically shifting with subtle patterns of emotion, now pulsed in deep blue silence. A color usually reserved for existential dread or philosophical breakthroughs. I believe, Zix finally said, their voice low and deliberate, that we may have miscalculated. Then 8 looked up. You mean in the test design? No, Zix replied, flickering into pale lavender, the equivalent of an alien sigh. I mean about the humans, about what we were testing for. Vin hesitated. They passed. Every section, they even improved our systems. Her ethical framework paper is already trending in 3 academic star clusters. And the quantum maze solution, it's now a training module for galactic engineers. Yes, Zix murmured. But it's how they pass that concerns me. Ven's stalks wiggled in confusion. I thought their methods impressed you? They did. But that's the point. Zix turned slowly toward the holoscreen, replaying the footage of Sarah laughing mid-simulation while debating whether to use memes to explain quantum spin. She didn't just pass our most complex trial, Zix said. She turned it into fun, and somehow made everyone else smarter in the process. For millennia, the Galactic Council had assumed that seriousness was the mark of intelligence. Rigor, solitude, precision. Every prior species that took the sentience evaluation came into it with solemnity, tradition, and a desperate desire to prove themselves. They prepared for years, chose elite minds, trained in complete isolation. And all of them had failed at least one section. But Sarah Chen? She strolled into the test with a smirk, a smartphone, and zero preparation. She didn't panic. She didn't stress. She asked for help, cracked jokes, sent cat videos, and treated the entire process like it was some bizarre team-building exercise. And it worked. Administrator, Zix said suddenly, do you know what the Zorian envoy said this morning? Then shook their head. They've added ice cream production to their scientific curriculum. Said they were inspired by Sarah's quantum dessert demonstration in the fusion segment. They believe emotional engagement improves cognitive absorption. Van blinked. She weaponized ice cream as a learning method. She did, Zix said. And now apparently, so are 17 other species. The realization began to spread across the council chambers like a ripple through space-time. The test was never meant to be won by a single mind. It was meant to show what a species valued when pushed to the edge, what they relied on when nothing else worked. And what humanity had shown was something no other species had even considered. They didn't isolate. They collaborated. They didn't fear failure. They laughed at it. They didn't obey the rules of tradition. They bent them into memes, turned them into inside jokes, and spread them across the internet like wildfire. They're not like the others, Zix said, more to themselves than anyone else. Every other civilization wanted to prove they were worthy. The humans? They never even asked what the prize was. Ven scrolled through the latest updates from Earth. The Prismatic Collective is testing what they call chaotic learning modules, inspired by Sarah's classroom. Zix's crystal shimmered. The Epsilon hive mind has become addicted to cat videos. Ven didn't even blink. They say it relaxes their decision-making clusters. And the Gloran Collective. They're now planning an interstellar interpretive dance to explain memes. It's in rehearsals. Zix chuckled, a shimmering tone that made the chamber glow slightly warmer. We tried to evaluate their readiness, but I'm starting to wonder if it's us who weren't ready. Ven tilted their sensory stalks. Ready for what? Zix turned fully toward them, crystalline limbs reflecting soft white light. For a species that doesn't take itself seriously. One that makes joy out of chaos. One that doesn't treat knowledge as sacred, but as something to remix, joke about, and pass along in bite-sized videos. Then hesitated. Are we threatened by them? No, Zix said with certainty. But we may need to reimagine everything we thought we knew about intelligence. They gestured toward the holoscreen again, now showing Sarah back in her classroom, excitedly explaining quantum entanglement using deepened dots and a lazy Susan. She doesn't try to be brilliant, Zix continued. She just teaches, shares, asks questions. She turned a mall food court into a particle physics lesson, and her students, they're inventing new ways to think about matter. Ven looked thoughtful. And she's not even considered one of Earth's leading scientists, which might be the most remarkable thing of all, Zix replied. Their true strength isn't in a single genius, it's in their collective curiosity. Later that cycle, the council held an emergency session. The vote was unanimous. Humanity was to be accepted into the galactic community. But more than that, the council proposed something unprecedented, a cross-species educational exchange. And at the center of it? One ninth-grade physics teacher from Cleveland. Back on Earth, Sarah scrolled through her phone between classes. Her inbox was flooded. Notifications from the Galactic Council, video replies from crystalline students halfway across the galaxy, and a dozen interview requests from alien news networks asking her to explain the cultural relevance of group chats and snack-based problem-solving. She sipped her coffee and sighed. I just wanted to grade papers today. Her students were already buzzing about the announcement. Miss Chen, one asked breathlessly, is it true we're getting alien exchange students? Sarah nodded. 3, apparently, starting next week. Do they eat food? Unclear. But we're doing a potluck anyway. Another student grinned. We're calling it a space luck. Sarah smiled. This was becoming normal. In the upper levels of Galactic HQ, Zix watched as the Educational Committee reviewed the latest reports. 17 species were now experimenting with MEMI-based curriculum modules. Efficiency in interstellar communication had risen by 300%, and solemnity across testing centers had dropped by 1,000. Zix looked around at the gathered leaders. We thought we were looking for perfection, they said. What we found was something far more powerful. A species that learns better by laughing, by sharing, by letting go of ego. They paused. In trying to measure their intelligence, we discovered our own limitations. And perhaps our future. Meanwhile, Sarah's group chat pinged again. Rocket Girl Jess, did you see? You're trending in 3 galaxies. Der Brain Brian, there's a hologram of you in a Zorian classroom. Pete, they're calling it the Chen method. Sarah, you're all insane. Ma, insanely effective. Kyle, so when's the first intergalactic field trip? Sarah, Friday. Bring snacks. Jess, I'm bringing space brownies. Pete, are those legal in every sector? Sarah, we'll find out. She laughed, tucked her phone away, and turned to face her class. The future had officially begun, and it was going to be ridiculous in the best possible way. Sarah Chen's classroom used to be just that, a classroom. Fluorescent lights, chipped desks, a lopsided whiteboard, and a hand-drawn periodic table in the corner that hadn't been updated since Pluto got demoted. Now it was a galactic learning hub. The desks had been rearranged into a loose semicircle to accommodate alternative life-form configurations. A sleek holographic display hovered over what used to be the flag bulletin board. There was an atmospheric recalibrator near the windows installed to make sure the new students didn't accidentally suffocate. And the janitor's closet had been converted into a neutral phase rest chamber, though Sarah was pretty sure one of the prismatic kids just went in there to practice glowing in different colors. She hadn't asked. She was still trying to get used to the fact that her 9th grade physics class was trending on alien social media platforms. Yesterday, someone in the Gloran Collective had posted a dance interpretation of her lesson on conservation of momentum. It had been reshared 12 million times. This morning, she walked in to find a care package from the Zorian Advanced Sciences Council, 37 books, 2 pieces of crystalline chalk, and a thank you note written in shimmering neurocode that translated roughly to you inspire confusion and progress in equal measure. Her principal had no idea what to do with any of it. Sarah sipped her coffee extra strong and checked her messages. Again. Galactic Council Education Committee. Reminder. Your classroom has been designated a Tier 1 cross-species experimental learning zone. Please ensure safety protocols are followed, particularly during practical demonstrations involving thermal explosions or MEMI-based lesson planning. Hi, Counselor Zix. Please confirm your availability for tomorrow's virtual roundtable on pedagogical chaos theory and its applications in zero-gravity learning environments. Rocket Girl Jess, from her ever-chaotic group chat, did you see the Zorian Ice Cream Physics Lab? They made a flavor that violates the second law of thermodynamics. Der Brain Bran. Turbrain. I've tasted it. It feels like a memory of cold. 19. She smiled, set her phone down, and turned to face her classroom. All right, she said, clapping her hands. Who's ready to talk about gravitational lensing? Miss Chen, Emma shouted from the back, waving her tablet. Can we go back to the part about time dilation? Zoop got stuck trying to understand Doctor Who and now thinks time is a circle made of jelly. Zoop, a young Zorblakan exchange student, made a series of gurgling sounds, then emitted a soft light from his forehead. Sarah had learned to interpret that as either deep thought or mild indigestion. Hard to tell with Zorblakans. I said the timey-wimey parts were metaphorical, he insisted. But the food analogies are confusing. Welcome to Earth science, Sarah said with a grin. We've been explaining atomic structure using pudding and raisins for centuries. Behind her, Mi Chen, a crystalline student from the Prismatic Collective and absolutely not related to High Counselor Zix, despite the similar name, raised what looked like a shimmering spike. Educator Chen, they said formally, is it true that humans discovered ice cream before they discovered calculus? It's true, Sarah replied. Also true that someone figured out how to deep fry it before we figured out germ theory. The class burst into laughter. Even the Gloran twins, currently expressing enthusiasm via synchronized somersaults, seemed amused. Sarah had never seen a class so engaged. They weren't just interested, they were hungry for knowledge. Not because it was on the test, not because they wanted a good grade. Because they genuinely wanted to understand this strange, funny, illogical world and the even stranger people who lived on it. And maybe in doing so, they were starting to see something remarkable about Earth and each other. After class, Sarah stayed behind to organize permission slips for next week's field trip. Not to a museum, not a zoo, but to the Zorblakan Institute of Subatomic Desserts, a lab where quantum particles were used to structure edible states of matter. It had started as a joke. Now it had its own department. She looked up as the door opened. Zix shimmered into view via hologram, their crystalline structure now accented with what appeared to be a Cleveland Browns jersey. High Counselor, she said, blinking. Is that team spirit? Zix brightened. We were informed that school pride is important in human educational culture. Sarah smiled. Only during football season. We are still unclear on the rules of football, Zix said thoughtfully. But we find the shouting deeply invigorating. They paused, then added, Sarah, we wanted to inform you that applications to your educational exchange program have exceeded 900,000. Sarah choked slightly. Excuse me? Many species are eager to participate. They have begun replicating elements of your curriculum, particularly your lesson on chaos energy and your encouragement of spontaneous creativity. She rubbed her temple. You mean when I let the kids build atomic models out of marshmallows and duct tape because the 3D printer broke? Zix nodded solemnly. They called it the most intuitively accurate metaphor for particle bonding we've ever encountered. Later that evening, Sarah sat on her front porch, laptop in her lap, typing up next week's lesson plan, Entropy and Entanglements, a guide to snack-based thermodynamics. The truth was, she didn't know how long this would last. At some point, the galaxy might go back to doing things the old way. The council might decide that Earth was just a fluke, that memes and chaos weren't real pedagogy. But for now, things were different. Classrooms across species had adopted potluck science, each student bringing something from their culture to help explain a concept. Cross-species bake sales had become common, and some of them even raised funds for multi-galactic research missions. And someone, probably Jess, was already working on Galactic Talk, a hybrid social app where students could live stream classroom experiments across time zones and gravitational zones. Sarah smiled as her phone buzzed again. Hi, Counselor Zix. Quick question. What is a pizza party, and how much pizza is required for a party to qualify? She laughed, then replied, It depends. Are you feeding carbon-based life forms, or everyone? A moment later, the response came. Zix. We can adapt our molecular structures for the sake of education. By the time Friday rolled around, Sarah stood at the front of the cafeteria, now a multi-species event hall, watching her students set up tables labeled with everything from Earth snacks to photonic treats from the collective. The Glorian were warming up for a new interpretive dance titled The Food Pyramid is Now a Hypercube. Zoop had built a working dark matter cotton candy spinner. Mi Chen was helping Emma explain the concept of palate fatigue to a group of visiting dignitaries from the Varnaxi cluster. Sarah took it all in and realized that this was teaching. Not just facts and equations, but connection, curiosity, chaos, laughter. Her classroom wasn't just a place anymore. It was a hub, a spark, a proving ground for how the universe might learn together. And as the intercom chimed with an announcement reminder, the alien dance team auditions will begin after the space potluck. Sarah leaned back against the wall and grinned. Maybe being Earth's accidental representative wasn't such a bad gig after all. By the time the Galactic Council officially launched the Interspecies Teacher Exchange Program, Sarah Chen was already famous in 3 galaxies, accidentally. She hadn't asked for any of it. She hadn't signed up to be a representative of Earth's educational potential or a pioneer in galactic pedagogy. She'd just been a tired 9th grade physics teacher in Cleveland who got zapped out of grading quizzes and into the most important test in the universe. And all she'd done was respond the way any good teacher would, by texting her nerdy friends using a bunch of memes and treating the whole thing like a chaotic group project. Now she was the face of a galactic movement. It started small. After her test results went viral, first across human social media, then on Glorinet, Zorian Stream, and something called the Crystal Feed, dozens of species began requesting insight into the Qin method. What was the secret? They asked. What philosophy guided her approach? Sarah, mid-coffee, blinking at her inbox, had replied, make it fun, let them be weird, and if the experiment explodes, just turn it into a lesson on energy transfer. Apparently, this passed for revolutionary pedagogy. Soon, cross-species educators were flooding her messages, requesting lesson plans, activity ideas, and clarification on things like group projects, potluck grading, and controlled chaos as a teaching tool. She hosted her first virtual workshop on learning through laughing from her living room. She wore a hoodie. One of her cats walked across the keyboard halfway through. Mechian, her crystalline exchange student, translated the session into prismatic refraction code, and it was replayed at over 70 educational institutions within a week. The second session included a live experiment where students from 5 species simultaneously demonstrated Newton's third law using improvised launchers made from snack wrappers and kinetic putty. It was chaotic. It was messy. Someone definitely got goo on a Gloran dignitary. It was a hit. Then came the proposal. The Galactic Education Committee sent her an official request: design the core curriculum for the Interspecies Learning Initiative. Her first reaction was panic. She wasn't a curriculum designer, she was just a teacher who used cat videos and food metaphors to explain quantum theory. Her second reaction was curiosity. What if this was a chance to build something better? What if learning didn't have to be so rigid, so serious, so afraid of getting things wrong? What if knowledge could be like a potluck? She opened her group chat. Sarah, okay gang? I need help. Rocket Girl Jess. Curriculum time? Brain Brian. Let's build the galaxy's weirdest lesson plan. Improv Kyle. Field trip Fridays. Make it law. Pete. Add philosophy memes to the homework. Quantuma. Each planet brings a dish and a science concept. It only took 2 hours to outline the basic framework. They called it Collaborative Chaos Curriculum. Its 3 pillars were simple. Learn together. Teach creatively. Celebrate failure like it's a win. When she submitted the draft, Zix messaged her in under 10 minutes. Zix, this is the most innovative framework we've received in millennia. Sarah, it's also the most poorly formatted Google Doc I've ever turned in. Zix, we printed it on photonic parchment. The typos are now immortal. Sarah, oh no. Zix, oh yes. Soon, Galactic School started adopting her methods. Holographic whiteboards projected meme templates. Science labs were built to encourage improvisation alongside precision. Students were graded not just on accuracy, but on collaboration, curiosity, and the ability to explain a concept using food analogies. Zorian math students discovered new number sets while building gingerbread fractals. The Gloran Interpretive Dance Academy developed an entire module titled Entropy, a choreographic exploration. The hive mind of Epsilon Eridani, after initially resisting individualized assignments, now hosted live debates where different nodes argued over whether pizza or tacos better represented molecular bonding. Sarah's email signature now included her job title as Sarah Chen, Teacher, Chaos Coordinator, and Unofficial Ambassador of Earth's Weirdest Ideas. Back on Earth, her classroom had become something between a science lab, a spaceship hub, and a performance stage. She now had 3 full-time alien exchange students and a rotation of visiting observers who sat quietly in the corner, taking notes, some of whom were literally hovering. Her students, thriving. They weren't just memorizing facts anymore. They were explaining string theory using jump ropes, writing songs about gravitational lensing, and arguing with crystalline life forms about the proper way to microwave leftovers. And the wildest part? They were teaching back. One of her 9th graders had co-written a new light-based mathematical language with a student from the Prismatic Collective. Another had coded a multi-species quiz app that adjusted questions based on the user's biology and homeworld gravity. No one asked for extra credit. They just did it. One day, Zix visited the classroom in person. Their crystalline forms sparkled with shifting excitement as they observed a lesson where students used marshmallows and toothpicks to recreate orbital resonance patterns. Afterward, they stood beside Sarah near the back wall, watching the students clean up. "You've changed how we think about learning," Zix said softly. Sarah laughed. "You say that like I planned any of this." "You did plan it," Zix replied. "Maybe not with intention, but with instinct. With trust." She looked over at Emu Ken, helping a younger student from another planet solve a physics problem using colored chalk and an enthusiastic series of sound effects. "I just tried to make it make sense," she said. "And if it doesn't make sense, we find a metaphor, or we dance it out." "Exactly," Zix nodded. "You've helped us understand that intelligence isn't just calculation. It's creativity, humor, community." They paused, then added, "You've made teaching joyful." Sarah smiled. "Best compliment I've gotten all year." Later that week, she was invited to deliver the keynote at the Galactic Education Summit, held on a moon-sized station orbiting a pulsar. It was the most prestigious academic event in the universe. She wore her school hoodie. She opened with a meme. She ended by saying, "If your students laugh, mess up, and try again, they're learning. If you laugh with them, you're teaching." The applause lasted 10 minutes. Somewhere in the back, a crystalline being stood up and started a slow, respectful light dance. Others joined in. Sarah didn't cry, but it was close. That night, back on Earth, she sat alone in her now famous classroom. The lights dimmed. The stars outside shimmered faintly. Her phone buzzed. Zix. Final approval granted. Humanity is now a recognized educational leader in the Galactic Council. Jess, you're officially the universe's favorite teacher. Brian, can we get jackets? Sarah, working on it. She leaned back in her chair, a quiet smile spreading across her face. This all started because she asked for help on a group chat, because she refused to take a test too seriously, because she taught science with jokes and snacks and joy. And now, the galaxy had changed its mind about what intelligence really meant. Not perfection, not pressure, not silence, but curiosity, connection, and a willingness to learn out loud. In the corner of her classroom, a sign now hung permanently. "Welcome to room 209, where the universe comes to learn." She turned off the lights, locked the door, and headed home. Tomorrow, they were starting a new unit: black holes, donuts, and other delicious mysteries of space. And across the stars, billions were waiting to tune in. By the time the second semester rolled around, room 209 didn't feel like a classroom anymore. It felt like a portal. Not a metaphorical one, although that would have been poetic, but an actual council-certified, stabilized cross-species learning zone, outfitted with a multi-dimensional ambient translator and a climate regulator that occasionally overcorrected and turned the left side of the room into a mild rainforest. Sarah Chen didn't complain. She'd taught in worse conditions. Besides, the rainforest section kept the Varnaxi students comfortable. They learned better at 82% humidity. On any given morning, her class now included 3 human students finishing their homework over Pop-Tarts. A prismatic collective exchange student pulsing gently as they solved tensor equations through light refraction. A Zorblacan juvenile practicing kinetic writing using 6 limbs and a stack of recycled notebooks. One member of the Epsilon hive mind, Node 47, who had taken up journaling as a way to explore individual identity and had a surprisingly solid sense of humor. And all of them were talking, laughing, sharing, helping. No one seemed to care what species anyone else was. They were just classmates. "Okay," Sarah said one Tuesday, raising her voice just slightly over the hum of activity. "Today we're going to talk about information entropy. Yes, I know you all just barely survived thermodynamics week. But trust me, this one involves cupcakes." Every head, tendril, and sensory stalk turned toward her. "Wait," said Emma, one of her human students. "Are these metaphor cupcakes or actual cupcakes?" Sarah grinned. "Both." A cheer went up around the room, some of it musical, some of it light-based. One student literally released a puff of celebratory vapor, and Sarah reached under her desk to pull out the box. She'd made 3 dozen the night before, color-coded and labeled with tiny info tags. Each cupcake, she explained, represents a message with a different degree of randomness. You'll work in mixed species teams to rank the messages by entropy, then eat the cupcakes. Zoop, the Zorblacan, raised a limb. "What if we accidentally absorb the message before ranking it?" "Try not to," Sarah said. "This is Earth science, not osmosis bingo." They got to work. Within minutes, students were analyzing frosting patterns, decoding messages, and debating whether sprinkles counted as noise or data. One of the Glorin twins danced out an interpretation of low-entropy chocolate cake. Node 47 wrote a short poem comparing a melted cupcake to the heat death of the universe. The hive mind was becoming worryingly poetic. Sarah loved it. After class, she sat down at her desk to review the footage. The council now required full documentation of educational outcomes in mixed-species environments, which sounded official but mostly meant she had to go back and rewatch her own class every night. She didn't mind. In fact, she often found herself replaying moments just to witness them again, little things like Zoop helping Emma visualize wave-particle duality using color fields, or Shen humming soft harmonic pulses when a classmate got frustrated, a kind of universal soothing gesture. She watched Node 47 hand a cupcake to a shy new human student who hadn't spoken much all week, and saw their shoulders visibly relax. This wasn't just integration. This was community. Later that week, Sarah was invited to present her students' collaborative project to the Galactic Pedagogical Advancement Board. It was supposed to be a 10-minute summary. She brought a slideshow, 6 cupcakes, and 3 students, 1 from Earth, 1 from the collective, 1 from Zorblac. She was nervous. They weren't. Emma opened with a meme. Muchen ran the data presentation using synchronized crystal pulses. Zoop demonstrated the tactile map of cross-cultural learning methods they designed from construction paper and vibrating foam. When it was over, one of the council members asked the only question that really mattered. "How did you get them to work together so effortlessly?" Sarah didn't hesitate. "I didn't," she said. "They figured that part out on their own. All I did was make the space safe and weird enough for it to happen naturally." The room was quiet for a moment. Then the oldest member of the board stood and said, "We'd like to adopt your model council-wide." Sarah blinked. "You want to take room 209 Galactic?" He nodded. "Yes." "With cupcakes." By spring, over 1,000 classrooms across the galaxy were piloting the 209 model. The key principles: collaboration over competition, questions over answers, chaos with a purpose. The council's orientation manual had been completely rewritten. It now included footnotes about spontaneous laughter as a bonding mechanism and snack-based evaluation frameworks. Even the Glorin had gotten involved, launching a traveling interpretive dance performance titled "We Learned It from Earth." Sarah got tagged in their promo video. She wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. Back on Earth, the changes were just as real. Her classroom had become a cultural epicenter. Students stayed after school to plan lessons. Parents came in to volunteer. Universities asked if they could observe. She started keeping a second coffee pot near the back because there was always someone visiting council officials, researchers, curious locals, even a retired astronaut who just wanted to see what the future looks like. One day, a new human student showed up with wide eyes and a heavy backpack. He was quiet during the first half of class, barely spoke during group work. At the end of the day, Sarah handed him a cupcake. "It's a metaphor," she said, "but it's also pretty good." He smiled, just a little. The next day, he brought a bag of marshmallows and asked if they could be used to explain gravitational wells. "Absolutely," she said. "Let's get sticky." By the end of the year, Sarah was tired. Happy, fulfilled, excited, but tired. Education was never easy. Education across species, even less so. But on the last day of class, she looked around the room at humans and Zorblicans, at luminous crystals and hive mind nodes and too many cupcakes and felt something deeper than exhaustion. Hope. Not the naive kind, the earned kind. The kind that comes from seeing students grow not just smarter, but kinder, braver, more connected to each other than the universe ever thought possible. That night, as she packed up her things, she found a handwritten note on her desk. Actually, it wasn't written. It was pulsed in light, translated into scent, braided in tendrils of molecular code. Each student had added a line. The final sentence read, "We thought we came here to learn science. But what we really learned was how to belong." Sarah sat back in her chair and let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. The galaxy had come to her classroom, and it had left better than it arrived.